So the story dominating the headlines today is the now infamous Signal chat leak involving top U.S. officials and a journalist. Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, was accidentally added to a secure Signal group with some of the most powerful people in the government. The Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, amongst others. And what were they discussing? Whether or not to bomb Yemen. Now just stop and think about that for a moment. A decision to engage militarily with a foreign country was being debated in an encrypted group chat without a congressional vote, without a public debate, and without any formal declaration of war. Now that should be the scandal. But instead, what is everybody focused on? Whether or not classified information was shared.
In the signal chain that we have been talking about, was there any mention of a target in Yemen?
I don't remember mention of specific targets.
Any generic target?
I believe there was discussion around targets in general.
Was there any mention, Ms. Gabbard, of a weapon or weapons system?
I don't recall specific weapons systems being named.
I'm not talking about specific, any weapon or weapon system.
I don't recall specific names of systems or weapons being used or named within the
Well,
chat.
I'm not asking whether, I don't want you to tell me what the specific weapon was, but any weapon at all. Mr. Ratcliffe, same question.
I don't recall.
How about anything about timing? Ms. Gabbard.
I don't recall specific.
Okay, so was there classified information being shared? I don't recall, I don't recall, I don't recall.
It's interesting to me that the Democrats are losing their loving mind over this. There was no classified information that was being shared over Signal. Signal is an encrypted app that's somewhat secured. Was the conversation something that could have happened or should have happened? I don't know, but at least it was a conversation. But to compare the two between Hillary Clinton and what President Trump's cabinet members were doing is absolutely absurd. It's not even comparing apples and oranges. At least both of those are somewhat in the same shape. This is like comparing an apple to a steak. There is no comparison at all between the two. Hillary Clinton was sending classified documents that were stamped TS or TSSCI. There was no classified documents. There was no classified information. It may have been sensitive, but it was an open conversation that was taking place over an important issue. And we should be glad that the conversation took place. You could see that people had input. It was thoughtful. It was collective. And at the end of the day, they did the right thing. They went right after this terrorist organization and shut them up. Thank God we have a president that's leading from strength.
Okay, so no classified information was shared, and thank God they at least talked about it. And what about our emails?
Why were those details shared on Signal, and how did you learn that a journalist was privy to the targets, the types of weapons used?
I've heard it was characterized. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that.
Right,
Thank you.
Okay, so no classified information was being shared.
Now the Secretary of Defense and the White House press secretary have said you're lying, have said there are no war plans there, have said there's no classified information. So the obvious question is, shouldn't you now demonstrate it? Shouldn't you publish the text?
No, because they're wrong. They're wrong.
But how can you prove that you're wrong? Maybe should you provide them to the House and Senate special committees on intelligence? Maybe. I don't know.
Wow. Well, you want to become my lawyer?
I'm throwing this out there, Jeff. I don't know. I mean, look.
I feel like no. I mean, I obviously. Let me just put it this way: my colleagues and I, and the advice that and the people who are giving us advice on this have some interesting conversations to have about this.
Yeah.
But just because they're irresponsible with material doesn't mean that I'm going to be irresponsible with this material.
Okay, so Jeffrey Goldberg saying, yes, classified information was in fact shared. So now the media narrative is all about whether or not classified material was improperly seen, not about the fact that an illegal act of war may have just occurred in secret. Meanwhile, the internet has turned into a full-blown pylon of Jeffrey Goldberg himself. People are calling him despicable for staying in the chat and taking screenshots. Others are pointing out that this is the same Jeffrey Goldberg who pushed discredited election eve stories in both 2020 and 2022. Some have resurfaced that he dropped out of college to serve as an IDF prison guard during the first Intifada, and in his own memoirs admitted to covering up abuse. He also is the same journalist who helped sell the Iraq War and spread the now debunked suckers and losers quote about Trump. And others are asking, if Goldberg had the chats before the U.S. bombed Yemen, why didn't he publish them when it could have actually prevented the strike? Why did he wait until after? Now, look, I'm not here to defend Jeffrey Goldberg. There are real questions about his history, his reporting, and the timing of when he chose to go public. But let's be clear, that's not the core issue. The core issue is this. Why was the United States discussing whether or not to bomb a foreign country? Not in Congress, not in public, but in an encrypted group chat. So let's remind ourselves of the facts. The last time America formally declared war was in 1942 against Romania, Hungary, and Bulgaria in World War II. That's it. Every major conflict since then, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, and yes, Yemen, has been launched without a formal declaration of war. So how does the U.S. government keep getting away with it? Authorization for use of military force, or AUMF. And the original AUMF passed in 2001, just after 9/11, and it was meant to give the president power to pursue those responsible for the attacks. But for over 20 years, that AUMF has been stretched and warped beyond recognition, used to justify drone strikes and bombing campaigns in countries that had nothing to do with 9/11. It's become a blank check for endless war, and every administration, Democrat and Republican, has used it. But here's the key point. Even that AUMF doesn't cover bombing Yemen in 2024 over alleged Houthi threats to commercial shipping. That's not an imminent attack on America. That's not self-defense. That's military intervention, and it requires congressional approval. What should have happened? Well, if this administration believed military action in Yemen was necessary, the president should have gone to Congress, presented the evidence, made the case, and asked for a vote. That's how a constitutional republic works. But instead, they decided to handle it in private. And now the media is chasing shiny objects like Signal chat screenshots and Jeffrey Goldberg's reputation. Now, here's what should happen now. First, there needs to be a real investigation, not into whether a journalist saw classified text bubbles, but into how and why this military strike was approved without congressional oversight. Second, the 2001 and 2002 AUMFs need to be repealed. They're outdated. They've been abused long enough. Third, Congress needs to take back its constitutional authority over war. If bombs are going to drop in our name, we deserve a voice and a vote. And finally, we need a press corps that focuses on power, not just personalities, that asks the right questions, not just the legal ones, and that holds leaders accountable for acts of war, not just for those who were in a group chat. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about Jeffrey Goldberg, nor is it about Signal. This is about a government that believes it can go to war without asking the American people. And if we don't care enough to stop it, they're going to keep doing it. Thanks for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen Show, which has a new showtime. Catch the full Kim Iversen Show, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Head to KimIversonShow.com. See you there.